Okay, I just want to take a quick pause and discuss this concept of distributed generation. The generation technologies that we've discussed so far in this class have traditionally been those used by large power companies to produce bulk electric power, including hydroelectricity. It plays a significant fraction in a lot of the generation portfolio of big utilities. Because these plants are usually large in scale, often with many generators, turbines located at a single location, they have traditionally been called centralized generation. Now what we're going to turn to is a second type of generation resource called distributed generation resources, or DG. Most people just say the words DG. DG resources tend to be smaller than centralized generation, and often, though not always, they use more new technology such as renewables. Additionally, unlike central generation, which connects to the grid at the high voltage transmission level, many of these distributed generation technologies connect at the low voltage transmission level or even at the distribution voltage level. There's a variety of reasons that we may utilize distributed generation resources. Number one is reliability. Storms, falling tree branches, brownouts, and acts of terror all threaten the grid, and when it fails, it can leave tens of thousands of customers, or even millions in extreme cases, without power for long periods of time. A distributed generation system can localize the impacts of the failures and reduce the number of people that are affected. The second reason we turn to distributed generation is flexibility. Big power plants, whether they're based on fossil fuels, nuclear energy, or renewable energy, are expensive to build and have very long payback periods. That means the utilities are slower to adopt new technologies. Smaller and cheaper plants based on renewable sources can be adopted at a little at a time to experiment with new technologies as they become available. Upgradability is the third reason we look at distributed generation technologies. Suppose I built a large wind farm with turbines that have an expected life of 30 years. Turbine efficiency is likely to improve over the next few years, but it's too costly to replace an entire farm at once. And since the farm is designed as a whole, each turbine affects its neighbors, I can't simply replace a few turbines with newer models. Smaller wind farms in more locations would allow me to adopt the newer turbines in one or two of the farms, gradually increasing my production without making a major investment in new equipment. The fourth reason we're turning to distributed generation more frequently in the power system is economy of scale. One reason large power plants are expensive to build is that so few of them are actually built. It's a highly specialized market. If I build a lot of small power plants with whatever technology is appropriate, the mass production effect will drive down the costs. The fifth reason we may turn to distributed generation is diversity. Distributed generation allows me to use a variety of power generating technologies, decreasing my dependence on any one resource. With stock portfolios, organizations, and energy, there's strength in diversity. The more resources I have to call on, the less dependent I am on any one resource. The sixth reason we turn to distributed generation technologies is efficiency. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, who we've been taking a lot of this information from, reports that about 7% of the electricity generated is lost in transmission and distribution in the high voltage system. Decrease the distance that it travels and you just decrease the amount that it's lost. Remember, we know that the resistance of a copper conductor is based on its length. So if we just simply decrease the length, we have less total resistance. So some of the reasons that we look into distributed generation technologies. Here what this slide illustrates is just kind of the network topology of distributed generation. Here we've got a couple generators. It then connects to the transmission network. We've got the transmission network that connects to the distribution network. A smaller power plant also connects to that distribution network. Then that distribution network will provide power to commercial buildings, to factories, to homes, and stuff like that. We see in the distributed network, or the distributed generation topology, this clear differential between transmission network and distribution network evaporates. In fact, most of the things all connect together at the lower voltage system, 13 kilovolts or so, like that. So we have this much more kind of organic network-looking topology where the different devices will connect at the distribution level. We've got local plants, we've got customers, we've got commercial buildings, we've got energy storage, we've got power quality devices, we've got wind power plants, we've got homes that can produce their own power. We've got solar, PV, all sorts of different things. And what we're going to do next in the class is we're going to turn to look at these technologies that aren't necessarily distributed generation. For example, wind can either be distributed or centralized in wind farms. But we're going to start looking at the technologies that are typically considered DG or distributed generation in some sense. Although I will say hydroelectricity is gaining popularity as distributed generation, particularly in its usage in what's called run-of-the-river microturbines. So you could also even put distributed generation. As technology improves, it gets harder and harder to rigidly categorize any sort of one technology as either centralized or distributed. Although we can pretty fairly say that coal and nuclear are firmly in the centralized generation world. I don't know many people who have distributed generation coal technologies. Definitely no one has a distributed generation nuclear technology. Natural gas, though, that might not be the case. Natural gas plants, you are seeing some DG applications of those in kind of the modern network topology.